some SMEs and entrepreneurs in the room, larger corporate and multinational companies. Great, looks like a really good balance of different stakeholders, but I'm extremely pleased also that we have quite some SMEs in the room, because we have been working intensively over the past year, particularly with SMEs in the region. And now looking at, I hope everyone can see it, the last poll in terms of priorities. So most organizations are looking into women in leadership, and particularly really working on establishing and making gender commitments in the first place. They're also looking into sexual harassment. Equal pay is highly up there. Women's entrepreneurship, gender responsive procurement is an important topic, and we're gonna discuss this in a bit much deeper. Supporting employees with caregiving responsibilities is not rated so far so high for the moment, but I think it's a good eye opener, and hopefully for everyone a good conversation upcoming later on, and particularly the care economy. So great, let's see how that evolves over the rest of the 1.5 hours, and seeing if there are insights that inspire everyone to maybe also look into different areas that you're currently not looking into. So if there is no further questions so far, I would like to, I would have loved to hand over to our colleagues and partners from the European Union, Stephanie Garrett, who is the program manager and gender focal point and attaché of the EU to the delegation of the Philippines. Unfortunately, Stephanie had a very urgent other conflicting meeting this morning, but she sent us a message through, and I'm gonna ask my colleague Amy to just give the floor to Stephanie, at least through her message. There we go.
Good afternoon to all, and happy Women's Month. Dear representatives of the WeEmpowerAsia program, of the United Nations Global Compact, and of ADB, dear representatives of the private sector, welcome to all. Thank you for giving me the opportunity today to open the program of this new event organized in the framework of the WeEmpowerAsia program. Today's discussion will focus on 3 new priorities for women's economic empowerment in the Asia-Pacific: gender-responsive procurement, the care economy, and the role of SMEs to economic development. Gender equality is critical to business performance and sustainable economic growth globally. Progress has been made in the region, but there are still gaps that have been exacerbated by the COVID pandemic and the lockdown measures. These gaps are, among others, domestic and childcare burden, barriers to finance for SMEs, more women concentrated in hardest hit sectors like garment and textile. I'm happy to underline that the WeEmpowerAsia program is helping addressing the gaps through its partnership with policymakers, entrepreneurs, and corporates. In that framework, the Women Empowerment Principles are a powerful tool. Globally, more than 6,000 companies have signed the principles, and in Asia-Pacific, more than 1,600 have done so. Since the start of the WeEmpowerAsia program in 2019, the number of signatories has grown by nearly 1,000 just in the 7 beneficiary countries of the WeEmpowerAsia program, namely China, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. I would like to particularly emphasize here the importance to operate transparently and take action to advance reporting on gender in the private sector. Let me give some specific examples developed in the European Union and that might be of interest in the Philippines. The Gender Diversity Index of the European Women on Boards and the EU proposal of a directive on corporate sustainability due diligence. The 2021 Gender Diversity Index of the European Women on Boards is a report that analyzes women's participation in corporate governance in the largest European companies that are listed in the STOXX 600 Europe Index, or in some countries, in national stock exchange indexes. This study looks at who makes decisions at the top of the biggest companies in Europe. Actually, the 2021 index highlights that the percentage of women in the C-suite and boardroom in European companies is way below what you would expect, and progress has been slow over the years. To quote Edwige Nuance, Chair of the European Women on Boards Brussels, clear objectives, measures and reporting linked with remuneration, effective talent management, succession planning and promotion rules all help. It is the best way to ensure real impact and major progress in an acceptable timeframe. On 23rd February 2022, the European Commission adopted a proposal for a directive on corporate sustainability due diligence. The proposal fosters sustainable and responsible corporate behavior and anchor human rights and environmental considerations in companies' operations and corporate governance. The draft law would, for the first time, require EU companies with more than 500 employees and turnover of 150 million euro to prevent human rights and environmental abuses along their supply chains, inside and outside Europe. These human rights and environmental abuses are, for example, child labor and exploitation of workers, and consequence on the environment, for example, pollution and biodiversity loss. For businesses, these new rules will bring legal certainty and a level playing field. For consumers and investors, they will provide more transparency. Companies play a key role in building a sustainable economy and society. The European Union remains committed to advancing and reinforcing gender equality and women empowerment with its public and private partners around the world. I wish you fruitful discussions today. Thank you. Salamat.
Thank you very much to Stephanie, and I know the Philippines colleagues are on the line. I think we didn't feel that you were not with us in the room. So thank you very much to Stephanie. And I just wanted to highlight two elements that Stephanie mentioned. She mentioned, firstly, the number of companies that really have made commitments over the past couple of years at a global level. And I just want to use the momentum to really say thank you to the commitment makers and the companies here in the region that have committed to implement the women's empowerment principles. And there are more than 1,700 WEP signatories. And also a great thank you to a lot of the work from the partners that are in the room today to really mobilize and to work together. So that number went up by more than 1,000 in Asia and the Pacific since the WeEmpowerAsia program has been launched. And I see some people smiling here as well, because we have co-created a lot of this work, obviously, together. So a big virtual applause. I can unfortunately not see all the participants using their icons, but please, a huge thank you and a great commitment. And one of the key partners that UN Women has been also working with to make this happen is the UN Global Compact, who is a dear partner of ours in implementing and promoting the women's empowerment principles. And I'm really thrilled that we have Risha Afine with us today, who's the advisor for target gender equality at the UN Global Compact. And the UN Global Compact does every 2 years a very interesting study. This gives us a little bit more of an idea on what are the trends on the WEPs, on the private sector in our region, but mainly also on a global level. And Risha, I'm going to hand it over to you to share a little bit what have we learned over the past 2 years, what has changed. Over to you.
Thank you, Katya, for the warm welcome. It's my absolute pleasure to be here. Hello, everyone. Today, I'm going to present on our latest report on the WEPs Gender Gap Analysis tool, which focuses on the progress amid pandemic challenges across regions. I will mainly present our findings from the APEC region. To start off, let me share a little bit about the women empowerment principles, in short, the WEPs and the tool. The women's empowerment principles are a set of guidelines for businesses on how to promote gender equality and women's empowerment at work, in the marketplace, and in the community. You can see it on the right. The Women's Empowerment Principles, or WEPs, is a joint initiative of the UN Global Compact and UN Women. The UNGC, UN Women, and the IDB Invest collaborated on the WEPs tool, which was supported by the governments of Japan and Germany, as well as BSR, the Coca-Cola Company, Itaipu, and KPMG. The WEPs Gender Gap Analysis tool is an online resource for companies to anonymously assess gender equality performance across the workplace, marketplace, and community. The tool has been used by more than 3,800 companies around the world since its launch in 2017 to assess their gender equality performance free of cost. Like this tool is holistic and toward women's empowerment, from the representation of women in senior leadership to ensuring equal pay for work of equal value, to respecting and supporting the rights of women workers in global supply chains. It is composed of 18 multiple choice questions. The main goal of the tool is to ensure companies are walking the talk. The tool is completely free, anonymous, and open to companies of any size in any sector. Implementing the WEPs allows companies to contribute to the achievement of the UN SDGs and helps to advance a range of UN priorities on gender equality, from tackling unpaid care workers through parental leave policies and childcare support to adopting gender-sensitive advertising and marketing practices to address rather than reinforce stereotypes, to empowering women entrepreneurs through gender-responsive procurement practices. Now, moving on to the next slide. Here is the global overview based on the data we have extracted from the tool. The WEPs Gender Gap WEPs Gender Gap Analysis tool sets a high bar by encouraging businesses to employ a holistic approach to gender equality and women's empowerment. This holistic and ambitious approach of the tool ensures that even the companies situated within the highest ranking are still able to identify multiple areas for improvement. Globally, companies' average score from using the tool has increased from 28% to 32%, signaling increased efforts by businesses to promote gender equality. However, much of that progress is limited to company commitments, while 78% of companies using the tool have made a commitment to gender equality, up from 68% in 2020. Levels of implementation, measurement, and transparency remain low, between 1 and 2% on average. If we see the industry findings, there is a little change in industry representation from 2020. However, it is interesting to note that many companies using the tool are in traditionally male-dominated industries. The top 6 industries are financial services, consumer goods, energy and extractives, food, beverages, and agriculture, industrials and engineering, ICT, etc. And majority, 53% of users are in companies that have more than 250 employees, while only 35% are SMEs with 10 to 250 employees, whereas micro enterprises are only at 12%. Moving on to the next slide. Can we go to the next slide, please? All right, thank you. All right, if we see the APEC overview, the commitment is clearly in place as over 5,700 plus CEOs have signed the web statement of support. Yet in the Asia Pacific region, only 44% of companies have an organization-wide gender equality strategy that identifies specific priority areas where further improvement can be made, and only 42% of companies include time-bound, measurable goals and targets in their strategies. While the majority of the companies in the region are at the beginner level, many have been promoted to the improver category. The ratio of companies with employee numbers beyond 252 MSMEs in the Asia Pacific is almost 50:50. And it is great to see the APEC region keeping up with global numbers and even doing better across the four pillars. Today, I'll be highlighting a few key areas in APEC, including the care economy, supplier diversity, and transparency. Let's go to the next slide. All right. Overall, steps have been taken in the right direction to support women in the workplace, but more emphasis on commitment and implementation needs to be provided in supporting employees with care responsibilities. Many women are held back due to the lack of proper and reliable childcare facilities in this region, showing that more companies need to step up to facilitate women's participation in the labor force by diminishing inequity in the care economy. The pandemic also increased the already disproportionate contributions of women in the care economy, highlighting the need for on-site childcare and subsidized off-site childcare. When it comes to commitment, 36% of APEC companies have a maternity leave policy, when the number is around 35% globally. Around 18% have a paternity leave policy in APEC, while only a staggering 6% have one globally. When it comes to implementation, 41% of APEC companies actively provide clean and safe breastfeeding rooms, while the number dwindles down to 34% globally. 1/5 offers on-site childcare facilities or off-site childcare subsidies, when only 12% does so globally. 28% in APEC provides an option for a phased return to work after maternity or paternity leave, and it's around the same globally. Next slide, please. Can you go to the next slide? All right, thank you. All right, if we look into the supplier diversity and women-owned businesses or SMEs, overall, supporting women-owned enterprises and incorporating a gender lens into procurement process are two significant areas where the world and the region can improve. When it comes to commitment, we have seen an increase in companies using proactive procurement efforts to work with women-owned businesses more, particularly in the value and supply chain. We see a lot of space for improvement in terms of supporting women-owned businesses, in terms of execution, particularly in terms of defining procurement targets or goals for the amount and percentage spent with women-owned businesses. Currently, the numbers are at 7% in APEC and 5% globally, which is something companies can work on going forward. And many companies were significantly impacted by COVID-19, especially women-led businesses supporting the recovery of MSMEs through inclusive gender policies and practices in the post-COVID recovery period can definitely pave the path to the economic empowerment of women. Moving on to the next slide. All right, now in terms of measurement, transparency, and reporting, the first step in closing the current gap in transparency and reporting, particularly in the marketplace pillar, is to measure. Setting appropriate indicators and goals would make it easier to collect relevant data, cast light on underlying issues in businesses, and determine what is working effectively. In the care economy, 65% track the number of women taking maternity leaves. However, we see that only 25% publicly report this number to stakeholders. While measurement has improved, there is still a gap in reporting. Only 36% track the effectiveness of their approach in retaining women employees post-maternity leave, and 27% track employees who avail parental or care benefits, and only 12% reports the numbers to stakeholders. When it comes to supplier diversity and women-owned businesses, only 12% tracked their percentage spend, and even a lower 8% public reported to stakeholders. And 13% encourages suppliers to set and measure targets and benchmarks on gender equality, but only 10% of companies include gender equality criteria in standard auditing protocols. Both globally and regionally, we noticed staggeringly low numbers in transparency and reporting when it comes to the marketplace pillar, making this a key area of improvement in transparency. Companies can do more to share the trends and data they have collected to improve transparency and accountability across all stakeholder parties. All right, that's it from my end. My apologies for not being able to go through all of the stats in depth. However, we can share the slides with you later so you can look at it in further detail. Thank you so much. Over to you, Katya.
Thank you so much, Rishwe. And my dear colleague Shavalini has already shared also a link to the report in the chat, so you can have also a deeper look there. Really, really interesting. And you mentioned a couple of areas that we're going to be going now into the next session or section of the event today. And we're going to be discussing some of these areas in more depth. And I recalled, and I just captured down one statistic that you mentioned out of the analysis of the, by the way, 400 companies in our region that have taken the assessment tool. And I recall that you mentioned 7% of them are setting currently procurement targets towards how much they spend with women-owned businesses. So that is, I think, in all agreement, not enough. And that's why I'm really excited that we do have a conversation today about what for some in the region still seems to be a very technical topic, gender responsive procurement. And I'm really thrilled that I have two people with me today who can unpack this in a much more elegant and easier way. And the way how we're going to be doing the next 3 sessions, we have decided to not go into a one big large panel, but we will have 3 more focused conversations on different topics. And the first one is on gender responsive procurement. And I'm really thrilled to have with us Samantha Hung, who is the chief of the Gender Equality Thematic Group at ADB and a very dear partner to UN Women. In fact, Samantha, we've just renewed our partnership this week officially. And I'm also pleased to see that one of the key topics that we have been and continue to work on is gender responsive procurement. With that, I'll hand it over to you to really moderate this conversation with our practitioners as well. And over to you, Samantha.
Thank you very much, Katya, for that kind introduction, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm really pleased to be here today for this belated International Women's Day event. So happy International Women's Day and Women's Month to everybody. Thank you to the UN organizers for inviting me to speak here today. As Katya mentioned, ADB, the Asian Development Bank, and UN Women share a very common commitment to promoting women's economic empowerment. And we did sign a renewed 5-year partnership through an updated memorandum of understanding last Thursday. And one of the priority areas highlighted under this MOU focused, as Katya said, on women's entrepreneurship and gender responsive procurement, our topic of discussion here. For ADB, we've been actively supporting women-owned businesses to overcome many gender challenges they face by different ways, such as facilitating access to finance, working with financial institutions to develop gender-responsive financial products and services, building women's business skills, and strengthening gender-responsive policies. So we see expanding access to markets and trade as a critical part of ADB's commitment to supporting women-owned businesses. And of course, gender responsive procurement offers one pathway to expand women's access to buyers. And we see this as a sustainable way to allow women's owned businesses to grow and promote more gender inclusive value chains. And for this reason, we're actively working with our public sector and private sector partners across the region to integrate gender responsive procurement into their entrepreneurship policies. And so we see this actually as an important opportunity now to promote gender responsive procurement as a means to support women-owned businesses as a key part of the pandemic recovery. Now, I think we all know that women's owned businesses and jobs have borne the brunt of the economic downturn as a result of the pandemic. For example, an ADB study on Mongolia found that an overwhelming majority of women-owned businesses feared the survival of their business. And other surveys in the Philippines and Vietnam, for example, have found similar results. And it's important to recognize that these reflect pre-pandemic gender gaps in entrepreneurship. For example, women's businesses in our region tend to be micro. And while 60% of MSMEs in Southeast Asia are owned by women, the majority of these are micro enterprises, they're informal enterprises, and they struggle to survive due to the gender-specific challenges in accessing finance, skills, and training in markets. And in addition, although the region has the largest global SME financing gap, 59% of this gap is attributed to constraints faced by women-owned businesses. So gender-responsive procurement is a proven way for governments and the private sector to strengthen their support for gender equality. I think to set the scene, it's important that we all speak the same language. So before we dig deeper, let's just bring us all onto the same page in terms of definitions. So firstly, from the beginning, what do we mean by gender-responsive procurement? And this is what's on the slide here. In simple terms, gender-responsive procurement, or GRP, as we say for short, is defined as buying directly from women-owned businesses. And so ADB and UN Women, for the purpose of our joint research, we also included in this definition buying from gender-responsive enterprises, which integrate international norms, such as the Women's Empowerment Principles and ILO conventions. So we can see from the diagram that this creates a vehicle for enriching supply chains by broadening the range of suppliers and goods and services available to businesses and governments for advancing women's economic empowerment. If we move perhaps to the next slide, I think it's also to, again, get back to basic definitions of what do we mean by a women-owned business. Well, there are several definitions in our region, and most of them focus on the majority female ownership. But there are still many countries which don't have a national definition. And this means that women-owned businesses, in a way, are invisible in procurement practices because the data isn't made visible. Recently, it's really encouraging that we're seeing more countries adopting definitions as part of their commitment to women's entrepreneurship. For example, in 2017, Vietnam introduced a definition through its SME law. And in 2020, ADB was very happy to have been able to support Indonesia to introduce its first national definition. And we are now currently working in the Philippines to do the same and adopt a national definition. But one common thing across both public and private sectors is the IFC, International Finance Corporation definition, which is on the lower part of the slide. And this is that either it has 51% ownership by women, or it's at least 20% female owned and has at least one woman as a CEO, COO, president, or vice president, and 30% of more women on its board of directors, where there is a board of directors. So this topic is fairly new and therefore probably not as yet widely recognized as an impactful approach as it arguably should be. We've seen in some regions, such as the US, more advancement, but at a global scale, it's still a relatively niche topic. But the important point is that there's a huge imbalance and the opportunity could be a lot better. So if we move on to the next slide, we can see some of the statistics here. Globally, the public procurement market is worth approximately 1/5 of global GDP. So that's very significant. And in addition, public procurement accounts for 30% of GDP in developing countries. And in our region, the share is about equal or higher than global averages. Yet the data estimates reveal that only 1% of this procurement spending goes to women-owned businesses. So that's a really stark figure of gross inequality. And the absence of sex disaggregated data for our region prevents us from really knowing the exact share of procurement in the region, but it's likely that it would be not dissimilar to global trends. So the data is clear. GRP presents an enormous untapped opportunity. It's an important vehicle for enriching supply chains and governments, and it's also an important vehicle for governments and businesses to advance women's economic empowerment. So I'm sure many of you know that this is a huge gap, and in our region, it's quite new. So for this reason, I'm happy that ADB and UN Women have been working together to produce a joint report called Gender Responsive Procurement in Asia and the Pacific as an opportunity for an equitable economic future. And if we move on to the next slide, oh, there you go, we can see that in the meantime, we've introduced we produced this introductory brief as a precursor to the main publication. And I think that the link is being provided in the chat. And this publication provides an overview of the current landscape in our region and clear recommendations for public-private sector actors. So I hope everyone will take interest in that publication. So moving on to the conversation, I now have the real pleasure to introduce Nusra Chenkeo, who's Unilever's Cluster Procurement Director for Southeast Asia and Australia and New Zealand. And Unilever is a company that has been a front runner and leader at a global level in implementing GRP. And so with this, I'd really like to give Nusra the floor to share her commitments, the commitments of Unilever and the approach on what you're doing in the region. Over to you, Nusra.
Thank you, Samantha. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here today to talk about one of the most passion for me to work with. If we can go to next slide, please. So Unilever, we start with our global commitment. We have social commitment that how could we as a multinational, very big scale company, how could we help build a more equitable and inclusive society? Because we are involving, if you look at, if you want to take one step back along the value chain, from the supplier of the suppliers, until the downstream, which is the distributors, customers, we involve in a lot of people and society. So we have to think about how could we as a company can make a change to this society. So we come with this suppliers diversity program that we commit globally at a global scale that we will spend 2 billion euros to buy goods and service from diverse business worldwide by the year 2025. So it's in the 3 years time. But then internally for Unilever, diverse business doesn't only mean women. We have 4 buckets around diverse owned business. The first one is woman-owned and woman-led business. Like Samantha mentioned earlier, not woman-owned, but the business that have the woman leadership that is counted as well. Secondly, LGBTQI-owned business as diverse gender. Thirdly, disability owns, and last but not least, minority ethnic owned business. So we launched this program back since year 2020, and we target to achieve the commitment by 2025. This is globally. What does it mean for Thailand then? Next slide, please. So we start by looking at the fact and figures. We have currently more than 1,300 suppliers that we work with every single day. We spend 750 million euros, almost 800 million euros this year already to this group of people. Then we have to think about how we ensure that we award business to more and more diverse suppliers. There are three strategies for us. The first one, we have to grow our current suppliers. And as a matter of fact, that in Thailand, there is no such a database that we can identify the gender or how diverse the suppliers is. So what we have to collect manually from out of 1,300 suppliers, we collect manually. Who are they? Are they diverse by gender? Are they diverse by ethnic or disability, as I mentioned earlier? Then we invest our time to grow these diverse suppliers. And now the first investigation, we found that we only found existing suppliers with women-owned business. So we ensure that every single tender, we include these diverse suppliers in. Secondly, we want to discover and develop more diverse suppliers. We target with new generation diverse SME, so small scale suppliers that that's been mentioned earlier. We work a lot with UN Women as well, and other government sectors, and also private bank and private sectors. How to ensure that we recruit these suppliers, not only to be part of Unilever database, but also we want to help them equip with a new skill set. Either it's digital skills or financial skills, or anything that they need in today's world. It doesn't mean that all of them has to become the Unilever suppliers in the long run, but at least they are equipped with the new skill set to survive in this digitalized world. Last but not least, we strongly believe that we cannot act alone. And that's why I'm very pleased to join this kind of forum, because we want to find partner to make it scale more and more. We want to advocate the alliance. We want to work more with you guys. I'm happy to share any best practice, but also the failure that we have been as well. And then we want to discuss with you guys, how could we build this further, bigger together. That's from my end, Samantha.
Thank you very much, Nusra. That was really interesting to show your experience. And I'm sure lots of people in the audience would like to learn from you. Maybe to start with, what would you recommend for companies that are wanting to start, but not sure how to? What should be the first steps, and what should they do first?
I think a few key steps, 3 things. The first one, set your ambition. Set what do you want to achieve, right? And once the ambition is clear, you align it cross-functionally. It's not only procurement program, it's the total company agenda. And for us, it's been really the support and sponsored by our CEO. And that's why we make it happen. We have the commitment to make this happen. Last but not least, I really recommend to start to assess your current baseline. You may get surprised on how good or how bad versus the commitment that you want to have. So start already, assess your baseline, and then build your ambition towards that. That would be my recommendations.
Thank you. And thank you for those very practical tips. I mean, on the one about baseline, it's about making it visible. If you don't collect or even just look at your data, you don't even know what the current situation is. So I think that's something very practical that all organizations could do, actually. Okay, you talked towards the end of your presentation about wanting to collaborate. And this is something that, we need to do more together. How do you actually see that collaboration working, and what could large corporates actually do together to advance GRP in the region?
Very good question. For instance, in Thailand, we don't have the database of diverse suppliers, diverse companies, diverse SMEs. We can start with that to work together, how to develop this kind of database. And we can develop together as well the program to help develop them with any future fit skills that they need, either digitalization, financial skills, anything that we need. Then again, the bigger is the better, because the more that we can collect the numbers of suppliers, and it would be the bigger impact that we can give back to the society.
Great, thank you for that. Now, I'm sure that there's more discussion that we could have, but I'm also conscious of the time, and I think Katja wants to move on. So I'll hand back to Katja now, and perhaps we can pick up questions later on. Thank you, Katja.
Thank you both. Thank you, Nusra. Thank you, Samantha. Very unfair, because you know how close this topic is to my heart as well. But we have to move on, because there are other areas that we also want to discuss. But we've heard from this one, gender responsive procurement as a way to bring women much more equitable into supply chains, into procurement schemes. There's one key area that actually holds women very often back to participate at all in business or in economic life. And that area is the unequal share of care responsibilities that women, particularly in our region, but across the world, are still carrying. And as we've heard, as we all know, this has been exacerbated through the pandemic. But the good news is also that we've heard from Rishwe that more and more companies are thinking consciously about care and the role that employers can play in the care economy. And with this, I really have the pleasure to introduce Dr. Aniruddha Munkur, who's the co-founder of Equalis and many more things. Anu, and she's been a very dear expert and advisor to UN Women. And we have been particularly working on a very interesting area, which we call, and we still debate about it, care entrepreneurship and the role that care entrepreneurship could play, for example, in the world of care and the care economy. And she's going to kick us off to a very insightful conversation, I hope, for the next 15 minutes on what we've seen, what we have learned, but also hear then from a practitioner again, who this could be applied in reality. Over to you, Anu.
Thanks, Katya, and it's wonderful to be here and joining you from Australia. And so, as in the Australian tradition, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I'm coming to you from, the lands of the Ghana people. In thinking about what I wanted to say today, I really wanted to start by acknowledging that globally, women perform more than 3/4 of all unpaid care work, and that's about 3.2 times more than men. And in ASEAN countries, women do up to 3.5 hours more unpaid care work than men do each day. In most extreme cases in the Asia Pacific region, girls and women end up doing 11 times spend 11 times as much time as men on unpaid care work and household work. And COVID-19 has really increased the unpaid domestic and care work burden. In fact, the time poverty that's induced by this additional burden has significant implications for women's economic empowerment and political participation. And if we really included the measurement of unpaid care work within GDP, it would add approximately $3.8 trillion to total regional GDP. So to leverage the potential of the care economy to create decent work for care workers while ensuring that care services are accessible, affordable, and of high quality, we really need innovation. Innovation in implementing creative ways to reward and recognize and reduce and redistribute care work. And we know that if such innovation is well supported, well regulated, and supported by an enabling environment, there's a huge potential to convert this care economy into a care impact economy that has a positive, empowering impact on diverse women. It creates inclusive economic opportunities, decent work, and it can ensure investment in the quality of care as a foundation for the next generation. So UN Women Asia Pacific has been doing some very innovative work in addressing unpaid care work through the WeEmpowerAsia program. And based on the learnings of this program, we've been looking to publish a think piece very soon. And I wanted to give you sort of a preview of what you might find in that think piece. The think piece specifically focuses on the childcare sector, but the learnings can really be broadened to apply to other parts of the care sector as well. So what is the challenge before us? On one hand, there is a growing demand for childcare. The market is expected to reach approximately $415 billion by 2025. In 2020, the Asia Pacific was the largest region in the global child daycare services market, accounting for about 33% of this market. On the other hand, early childhood education and care remains chronically underfunded in the Asia Pacific region. It accounts for less than 0.4% of GDP. So while governments are responsible for making care services accessible, affordable, and of high quality, the issue is really too big to be solved by them alone. And that's why we need innovative and collaborative solutions across multi-stakeholders. And one of the interesting stakeholders we find who's stepping in to address this gap in the market are entrepreneurs. We are seeing some innovations in how care entrepreneurs are filling this gap in the market. Particularly, we are seeing a mushrooming of technology-based solutions, and technology-enabled platforms can offer a great potential for the care industry, like matching those care workers with those who require care, and thereby increasing access to work in the care sector. However, there are risks which require governments to provide guidance and regulations and an enabling environment to support such solution in order to turn them into an inclusive business opportunity that addresses the skewed burden of unpaid care work. So to transform the care sector into an impact economy through entrepreneurship, we need to recognize innovation levers such as social impact entrepreneurship, technology, and a much more holistic ecosystem approach to contribute, rewarding, recognizing, reducing, and redistributing care work. However, we also need to be really realistic here, especially when it comes to childcare. Care entrepreneurship is only one pathway. And it is important to recognize that we need a much broader systemic transformation of the care industry. Care enterprises are not really meant to replace the public provision of care. Further, they are not a panacea for all the challenges we face in addressing unpaid care work, but can be one of many complementary approaches to transition from an informal to a more formal care economy. We'll hear very soon from Nadira Yusuf, a leading care entrepreneur from Malaysia, about her experiences. But before I hand over to her, I just wanted to highlight a few key recommendations we're making in this think piece. For governments, we feel they can positively support the care economy by implementing laws and policies to regulate the care environment, protect the labor force, and to ensure safety and protection of care workers, elderly, and children. In particular, regulations need to be adaptive to meet the rapidly changing care service delivery models that are being supported by technological platforms. Governments can also use regulations to incentivize high-quality employer-supported care. And employer-supported care is something that's already being offered in many contexts and can be a market development opportunity for care entrepreneurs. A significant role for government is to invest in care workers certification in order to ensure that we have high quality of care services as well as a safe environment in which they are delivered. Market players should focus on building and strengthening the care ecosystem through inclusive accelerator programs that bring together a wide range of enterprises and various investors and experts to support care enterprises. The accelerators offer must include supporting business aspects as well as impact and look at gender equality. The delivery modes should be really interactive with peer-to-peer discussions, mentoring, and participatory training. And finally, the sector lacks investments, and governments and investors need to support investment into care entrepreneurship. Drawing on lessons from other sectors like the green economy, blended finance offers a interesting model for investments in the care economy. And blended finance is really a strategic use of development finance for the mobilization of additional finance towards sustainable development. Blended finance can attract commercial capital for care entrepreneurs while at the same time providing financial returns to investors. So with that, I'll hand you over to Nadira to talk about her reflections based on her experience. And it'll be great, Nadira, if you could talk about the role of employer-supported care. Nadira Yusuf is the founder and CEO of Kiddo Care, a technology platform that connects parents with reliable, trained, certified babysitters. Nadira, over to you.
Thank you so much, Anu, and everyone here at the event today. I'm very happy to be part of this discussion, and just to have a very quick introduction to Kiddo Care again. We are a 3-year-old startup based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and we provide a platform using technology that we hope to solve the inefficiencies of childcare, particularly in Malaysia. So we use technology to make sure that childcare is accessible, it's reliable, the services are safer, and we're also a platform that's very heavy on our agenda to provide decent income to care workers and allow them to have career progression along the way. And we really work with companies in 3 ways. So we make available a platform that allows partnering companies to provide childcare subsidies for on-demand care to their employees as part of their employee benefits. Now, this is especially needed for our partners that are embarking on flexible working policy, which includes work from home days. right? So by providing this on-demand childcare benefits, it allows their employees to get childcare help only when needed, empowering them to work more productively when they are at home. We know how it is trying to manage childcare and working from home. So this is one of the solutions that the company can actually provide to their employees. Now, these companies are also seeing their employees taking emergency leaves when childcare centers and schools are suddenly closed due to COVID-19 outbreak, and it's still prevalent now in Malaysia. So on-demand childcare subsidies actually also support the employers by minimizing inefficiencies due to sudden leaves by their employees, right? So secondly, we work with companies with women empowerment agenda to support the training of our carers from the lower income group. So these companies would then allocate some of their CSR funds to sponsor the training of our applicants in the areas of childcare, children development and enrichment, CPR and first aid certification, as well as handling children with special needs. So this would be about a 14 days program that will result in professional carers. So this is the higher value service, the better income, right? Allowing them to earn pretty good, decent income through delivery of high quality childcare services. So one of the ways for the companies to work with us is to elevate the positioning of childcare workers. Right. Lastly, we work with COVID-19 affected companies to manage the transition of their retrenched workers, especially from the hospitality, airlines, education, and the retail industry. So we help them to repurpose their skills for high value childcare services. Now, this allows them to earn income through either part-time working or full-time working during this transition period. So these are some of the initiatives that we're doing with our partnering companies in Malaysia. And we're very happy to share that with everyone. Thank you.
Nadira, what advice would you have for those companies thinking about employer-supported care? Why is it useful for them to think about employer-supported care? How does it help their employees? And what should they be thinking about when they're engaging with care enterprise?
So I guess, as an employer, you probably want to look at how it will benefit you as a company too. When you support your employees, then you're basically also providing a better environment for them to be happy, to be productive, be efficient in the company. But we know how childcare is actually a problem to not just women, even fathers these days, right? Because of the school closures and things like that. So try to look at something that can be more inclusive. I actually applaud many companies taking up the challenge of building childcare centers in their offices. But this is something that needs to be really looked at. It's good to have that, and I think we still really do need that. But we have to look into new ways of work, embracing the new work culture, the new generation that's going to come in, and just embarking on or probably trying to embrace flexible working, something that also supports their work-life balance. So new approach will have to be looked at. And working with care entrepreneurs actually provides that kind of different alternatives for companies to consider. So I think that's important, and looking at alternatives that can be complementing to what's available at the moment. This is important.
I can go on having a long chat with you, but I know that we've got to move on. Katya, back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, both. And I think recapping from the first conversation, from the second conversation now, and in the interest of time, I have to say we're not getting around women entrepreneurs to really address the issue of gender equality in the world of business. Hence, I'm super excited that actually the last conversation that we're going to have in this kind of trio of three moderated conversations, we will be talking and zooming into entrepreneurship in a much deeper way. And I'm really pleased to have with me Lotte Marie Power, who's the Women's Entrepreneurship Lead at Bob Inc. And I know Lotte Marie can explain much better what Bob Inc. does, so I won't waste any more time and hand it over to you, Lotte Marie, to kick us off.
Thank you so much, Katja, and hi everybody. Really happy to be here. I just realized this morning, Katja, we've been working together for the last 2.5 years already on this question on how can we leverage the power of SMEs as a force for inclusion in the entrepreneurship ecosystem. Now, we came up with some really cool practical solutions that we want to talk you through today. But before I do, let me first introduce Bob Inc. And why we are so excited to work on this topic. So Bob Inc. is a Dutch NGO, but we also have offices in Asia and in Africa. And basically what we do is we try to make beneficial products and services available to low-income consumers. Now, when I say beneficial products and services, you could think about, for example, a water filter or a solar panel or sanitary pads, like basically any type of product that would improve someone's livelihood at the base of the pyramid. So we always do that through the power of entrepreneurship. So we work a lot with micro entrepreneurs, but also with SMEs. Now, I'm really happy that I get to be the women's entrepreneurship lead at Bob Inc. So what that means is that I try to incorporate a gender lens in everything we do. So in trying to make these products and services available. So where that starts is actually looking at the customer and looking at customers, them being both men and women, and looking at what are their different needs and how would a product or service benefit them. But then also translating that to, for example, SMEs, what we're talking about today, how can we support SMEs to serve both men and women better? And how does that translate into, for example, their marketing practices, the design of their product, the language they use, the branding they use, etc. But it even goes a step further. If as an SME, you really want to focus on both men and women and having that impact, you also need to start looking at your leadership. Do I have a diverse leadership in which both men and women are represented? How am I managing my workforce? Do everybody get an equal voice? Again, both men and women, but also people from different backgrounds. You can also start looking at your supplier base. Do I have diversity there? And also in your community, are you becoming a voice for inclusion to your fellow entrepreneurs? So those are some practical things you could do, but we all know that entrepreneurs are, of course, not an island. They are operating into a wider ecosystem. So in order to really make sure that women entrepreneurs get to fully thrive, you also need to start looking at accelerator programs, like how are they doing the selection and the outreach to both men and women entrepreneurs? Are they supporting them only on really diehard entrepreneurial skills, or are they also looking at networking and soft skills? Same for finance providers. Are there financial products suitable for both men and women entrepreneurs? How are they doing their outreach and their selection, etc.? Now, I think both on all these levels, so SME, accelerator and finance providers, there's a huge willingness to work on gender inclusion and incorporating a gender lens. But you sometimes might wonder, maybe also people that are currently participating in this event, but where to start and how do I make this super practical? Now, that's where I get to the partnership with UN Women under the WeEmpowerAsia program. So I'm really happy that we got to spend time to co-create these super practical toolkits together with entrepreneurs and accelerators. So we called them the We Rise toolkits, and we actually get to share them today with you. So you can find the links in the chat. So on the entrepreneurship level, so on the entrepreneur level, we really wanted to focus on helping women to get access to the right type of finance, looking at their financial need, doing their homework, looking at what finance providers are out there, what would be the best fit with my company, but also looking further even and also looking at gender bias. How does gender bias play a role within my organization, outside my organization? When I, for example, do a pitch to an investor, how could gender bias come in there? What can I do about it from my side, etc. And I think the most exciting tool in the toolkit is the one in which we try to translate the women empowerment principles, which we already heard a lot about in the beginning of this session, where we try to translate these in a way that also smaller businesses could start incorporating those in a very practical way. Now, on the accelerator level, we have tools related to how you do your outreach, checking your selection criteria, making sure that you provide that wide range of support, not just only entrepreneurship skills, and really making sure men and women benefit from your programs in an equal way. And we're actually also now developing that for finance providers. I'm really happy that 2 years ago, we did a training in Indonesia in the We Rise toolkit. So with how like with the getting to know your finance need and thinking about finance providers, and also thinking about bias and how to incorporate a gender lens practically in your business. And one of the entrepreneurs that joined that training is actually here with us today. Her name is Gina Priadini, and she is the founder and CEO of Good Vibes. So I'm really happy that she gets to share now today about that experience. So maybe Gina, maybe we could start off with you giving a short introduction of you and your company, and maybe you could zoom in on what were some of the barriers that you faced to both scale your company, but trying to be inclusive at the same time, and maybe with the We Rise program and the We Rise toolkit, how has that helped you in achieving your goals? Over to you, Gina.
Thank you for your explanation about We Rise. My name is Gina from Jakarta, Indonesia. Actually, I have started the business in 2019. After I spent 11 years in a technology industry. Back then, when I have worked in technology industry, of course, women has become a very minority gender there. And it's, I got used to the situation where men got more of chances rather than women in the ecosystem. So I've started the Good Vibes. Good Vibes actually a brand for natural skincare and aromatherapy that is having focus in genderless product for to ease the stress and sleep anxiety for the urban people. When I have started the business, I'm thinking about I'm using the lean method to build the business. So at the first hand, I'm looking for the robust methodology or framework for me to know and comprehend on how to operate and starting the business. Luckily for me is I have found ukmindonesia.id that is affiliated with UN Women with the WeLearn program. So when the WeLearn seeking for entrepreneur who is going to do the trainer yeah, for the trainer. So I'm following the program, and from there I learned so much. I learned so much that the right platform can really build your good fundamental about how to run the business sustainably, something like that. And after 1 year using the WeLearn platform, and then we met, we met in We Rise toolkit. It is more like, WeLearn is very micro project, but in We Rise, I think it's more comprehensive on how we deal with our scale up, how to scale up the business, how to run all the finance things, something like that. And also how to tackle the gender bias. From there, I learned so much on how to see my business so much clearer, and the framework itself is also helped me to give the guideline to know where we are now and where we want to. And then from there, I think where We Rise is having such a very complete and comprehensive tools for me to follow. For example, if you want in the entry level, and then you have to complete on to courage to, since the business is so much in dynamic and very uncertainty in during pandemic, and we have several business to business project that needs more of capital rather than to do the B2C. So the platform helps me to comprehend the whole cash flow, and then also put courage to access to access the financial helps from the banking. And then I'm seeing WeRise and the whole framework for the entrepreneur is something that is, if more of fellow entrepreneur accessing it and comprehend it in the like in the good way, yeah. I mean, comprehensive way to see all the things and use the framework on top of the operation. I think it will help them to forecast and also like to tackle the risk that might come. I think that's from me, Mary.
All right, thank you so much, Gina. And you already mentioned that the WeRise framework helped you to kind of have an overview of where you stand and where you want to go, and you're already recommending other SMEs to use it. Maybe as a last question, what would be like really practical recommendations? Like, what do you think other SMEs that are also joining this session today, where could they start in making their own businesses more inclusive and also use it as a force for inclusion in the whole ecosystem? Like, do you have some practical tips for them?
My practical tips is when I'm active SME women-owned businesses in Indonesia, I have found the fact that these business owners, women business owners, started the business is not from the they tend to see what they can do, what they can offer to the neighborhood, and then they started the business from there. They start the business from what they can produce, not seeing it from the market fit approaches. And in WeLearn, toolkit, I think that is the very fundamental forefront before we talk about the finance things about like operation like that. I have realized that this is a very fundamental challenge we have to answer ourselves as a woman business owner, because we have to know whether the market fit is already there or not, and we have to make sure at the early stage of our business is we have to ensure that the market fit is already happened before we do a lot of things later on. Yeah. So this missing simple step is get told on a lot of entrepreneurs. They start to struggle in the step of like 1 year, the third of year, like they start to feel that the business is stuck. Why the business is stuck? Because they see the business is from the point of view, not the market point of view, something like that.
All right, thank you so much. And I'm really happy that the WeRise Toolkit helped you on one hand in a very practical way. So looking at your business and your cash flow and your market fit and all these more operational sides, but it also then helps you to think through, okay, in doing all these operations and struggling through these first few years as an entrepreneur, but then still, how can I be mindful to be more inclusive? So thank you so much for sharing your story, and I'll hand it over to Katja.
Thank you very much, Lotte Marie and Gina. Very insightful conversation. And in the meanwhile, we had also quite some questions. And thank you, panelists, for helping us to save a little bit of time and answer them live in the chat or in the Q&As itself. But I just wanted to highlight one question before we move on, which is actually reminding me when I listened to Gina and to Lotte Marie. I think one of the participants was asking actually why only focusing on women-led or women-owned enterprises, and really looking much more also at companies or enterprises that are embracing more gender equality into their business operation. And I think Gina's company is an example, and many of the SMEs that we have been working with And indeed, it's more likely when they are women-led, but we have been seeing very similar results also with some of the male-led or any genders-led other organizations or SMEs. I think it's really important to really embrace in sort of any of the trainings the importance of gender inclusive or wider inclusive business conduct, as we have also heard from Nusra in the beginning, because in the end, it's these enterprises also, right, that will have other women or people in their supply chains and managing their businesses. So I think it's a giving through the supply chain, the more gender responsiveness at all levels that we are creating, the more it will really end and include more women in an equitable way in the marketplace. And with this, I would like to move on to our last session of the day, which is not going to be in the same style and having a dialogue or moderated conversation, but I think we can't leave the room today without having a conversation around transparency and accountability and reporting. I think Rishwe kicked us off with sharing that this is one of the areas where companies are showing the least progress. Even if they are taking actions, very often it doesn't come reported and it's not visible to the, often not internally, but certainly it's very often not visible to the external world. And that's one of the areas that we collectively want to prioritize and have to prioritize, businesses, governments, policymakers, NGOs alike. And that's why we've started to work on something what's called the Transparency and Accountability Framework. So we have looked at the Women's Empowerment Principles and really mapped this out to many platforms and indicators that are out in the public on gender reporting, and really developed a very consolidated and aligned framework with recommendations on what businesses could and should be reporting to really track their progress on gender equality for themselves and for improving their own performance, but also make it visible for others and changing entire industries. And without going into much detail, just we're going to be adding the framework into the chat right now. But just 2 lines on this before I will ask my colleague Suela from our Indian team to share a little bit more practical examples on this. But what this framework does is it really identifying 2 categories of indicators. One, what we call essential indicators. And please don't try to read it. It's all in the framework we have shared. But it's basically a set of indicators and categories like women's leadership, equal pay, safe and inclusive workplaces, and gives very strong guidance on reporting. And every company can report on this. There is no way why not. And then we have another set of indicators, which we call complementary indicators, which goes much more into depth also into your supply chains. For example, indicators like reporting procurement spend would be falling into this. They're equally important, but they need to be applied differently in different industries. So please have a look at this. And what we're going to be doing now, because we have in the audience also quite some of our web signatories and companies that really want to advance that area. So I'm going to ask first my colleague Suela, who's the Indian Program Manager for WeEmpowerAsia, to share her experience on her work with the Indian companies. And then we will have a little live demo on helping companies to report on our WEPs.org platform. But first of all, over to you, Suela.
Thank you so much, Katja, and once again, a very warm welcome to all of you. I would, before start to giving you some ideas on what some of the Indian companies are doing on reporting, there is a little poll that we have devised for you. So the question is that does your organization report externally on progress on gender equality? Please go ahead in responding to this. Amy, you would let us know, right, when we have received maximum responses? Okay, so about half of the people have responded. Please go ahead. This is anonymous. but would really help us also, all of us, to understand that how, what is actually happening on ground when it comes to transparency reporting. Okay, not bad. 54% of the audience present here responds, and 49%, which is a substantial percentage, do not take steps on reporting, which is expected. So thank you so much, Amy, for the poll. And also I can see that 7% of you also do not know how to do this, which is also a good segue into the conversation that we would be leading, particularly in this section. Katya mentioned you in very brief that what we have done when we developed the transparency and reporting framework and what aspects it entails to help you report back on the gender diversity indicators. I will give you a very brief example and then would request my colleague Firoza to be able to give you a demo of how you can really report on some of the indicators. So in India, just to let you know that there are over 322 companies that have committed to women's empowerment principles, and these are, very large, renowned organizations, including some of the smaller companies as well. But this particular example is from a company called Zensar Technologies, who was awarded the WEPs 2021 award in the category of transparency and reporting. And so what the intervention was around making their reporting quite aligned with the women's empowerment principles. Although they were reporting earlier on gender diversity within their organization, what they realized that to become, for the entire management team to be accountable, there must be frequent tracking of all kinds of gender indicators in all their metrics. So they relaunched their diversity metrics and involved multiple parameters through a dashboard. These were around gender headcounts in senior management, middle management, junior management, permanent employees with resident status. They were also looking at generational diversity, top talent, women's retention rate, hiring of women employees, and region-wise headcounts, among many others. And they started measuring and tracking these indicators with an objective to provide leaders accurate information on their diversity and inclusion data. And they also use this information to monitor the effectiveness of their D&I investments, to understand what are the current gaps and what are some of the opportunities to integrate D&I into all aspects of their hiring, performance and development, and their supply chains. Now, the new dashboard was made accessible to all people, managers, senior leaders, and DI council members who were all in decision-making roles. And over the years, they have continuously evolved their strategy, bridged that gaps, and aligned new ways of thinking about diversity and inclusion and reporting. They also participated in global benchmarking studies from McKinsey, Avatar, UN Women, and others to gain an independent perspective about where they rank in comparison with other companies. So this initiative for greater transparency, monitoring, and reporting has helped them drill down into our performance gaps to identify improvement areas and develop a standardized set of processes and metrics related to gender. So this has also allowed them to systematically work towards achieving their vision of 50% diverse workforce by 2025. So now I will hand over to my colleague Firoza, who will quickly show you a demonstration of how to report on WEPs.org. Over to you, Firoza.
Thanks a lot, Suhaila. And we've prepared a very quick demo to show how you can report on WEPs.org. And just perhaps if we can play that video, that would be great. Hi, everyone. I'd like to take you through a quick demonstration of how to report your progress online on WEPs.org, which is the global website and hub for everything WEPs. As a first step, you will need to go to the WEPs.org website, where you can see the sign-in button on the top right, where you can log in with your company details to get started. You may notice that my browser address is different, and that's because we're using a test site to show you this demo. Now, this is assuming that you're already a web signatory. So in case you haven't done so yet, you can sign up to the WEPs by clicking on Join here. The sign-up process is very straightforward. You will need to enter your CEO details, sign the CEO statement of support and upload it, and then provide your primary and secondary contacts information who will serve as your WEPs focal points. And then you can fill in the remaining fields in this form and click Submit. For those of you who are already WEP signatories, you will need to create an account in order to update your company profile and start reporting. As mentioned, you can do this by clicking on Sign In, and then go on to click the Sign Up Now button. Here, it will be very important to make sure the email you provide is the same as the email address of your primary or secondary contact which you provided when completing your application. If you need any help retrieving the details of which email address to enter here, do let us know and we'll be happy to share the relevant information on your WEPs focal points with you. Once you enter this email address, you can get your verification code and fill out the other parts of the form and then create your account. To show you what your account will look like, we have set up a test account to take you through it. Here, I will enter my test account focal point details and password and then click Sign In. Then click on My Account, which leads you to your company profile. As you can see here, this is the WeEmpowerAsia test company profile that we set up. You can click on Edit Company to get started. You can now enter your details like you did earlier for your company, including your CEO name, title, and the same contact details which you provided earlier. Then you can start reporting in your company profile. In a first step towards reporting, you're required to fill in the baseline indicators. These include the percentage of women employees, the percentage of women at the management level, and the percentage of women on boards, the executive team, or partners. The baseline indicators are required when completing the application, but reporting publicly is optional. In a next step, you can share your progress against what we call the essential indicators in the Transparency and Accountability Framework. You can enter information on indicators like the percentage of women and men employees, the percentage of new hires, and the retention rate of employees, for example, that have taken parental leave, and so on. For this section, you can similarly enter the information here and then decide whether to keep this information public or private. And here I've toggled the information to make it public, and you can always change it as per your preference. It is important to point out that at all times, the data you select to keep private is completely confidential, and you and women cannot access this information. This reporting exercise is purely to assist you in understanding where you stand on key indicators for empowering women in your workplace, as well as to allow you to share and update your progress with others if you choose to do so. We encourage you to enter the information for all the indicators, even if only for internal tracking, as it remains up to you whether you would like to publicly report your data. If you don't have the information you need to report, you can always save your profile and update it at any time. Once you've entered this information and your preferences, you can click on Save. To give you a quick look of what your company profile looks like on the WEPs.org website, here is an example. You can go to Companies, Progress Reports, and then view your company profile. As you can see, this is the WeEmpowerAsia test profile which we just set up. Based on the preferences we selected, this is how the test profile will show up on the website to the public. Every company gets a profile that is automatically generated with the number of employees, industry, and location. You can also see the baseline and essential indicators which we chose to make public. If you change your mind whether to keep any information public or private, you can always edit your company profile and save your preferences, which will automatically reflect on this website. And with this, you would have completed setting up your company profile and reporting. Please feel free to reach out to us at weps@unwomen.org anytime, and we'll be happy to help with any questions you might have.
Great. Thank you very much, Feroza, for sharing that. I know this was a very practical demonstration, and I just want to say we're also going to make sure that that will be uploaded on YouTube, and we will be sharing with you the link when we share the recording of the session today. But I really think it is an important, very practical guidance to really drive action on International Women's Day today. So that would be one way to take your actions forward. But really on the hour, I would love everyone to stay on for one more minute. Really would like to thank or take the opportunity to thank all of the panelists and participants of today's event. I really think it was a great and very filled agenda, but I think with a very good flavor of practical ideas and clear guidance on how to take some of these areas further in your own organizations. We would be really happy if you could help us to fill the last 3 polls of today to help us to learn much more also on how to improve some of these sessions in the future. But also we would really like to hear which of the areas that we have been discussing today have inspired you most to take action, not because how they were presented, but really what do you think, in the last questions, which of the areas that we have discussed today could be really areas that you think about taking forward within your own organization. So with that, we obviously won't show the results to everyone, but we would be really happy to, if you could take some time to just fill that in. And with that, just a little reminder as well, we're going to be sharing the recording of the session, and we will be also sharing with that the links to all of the publication and knowledge products that had been shared today. And thanks a lot to everyone, and have a lovely rest of the day and a rest of International Women's Day month. Celebrate and make commitments. Here we go. Thank you very much, everyone.